a briefkinety contact near Avdiivka, and at least 2 Russian armor hulls were obliterated. 1 main battle tank neutralized, and multiple hostile infantry fire teams were pinned down in zero cover. This was no massive strategic breakthrough and did not shift frontline boundaries. But tactical observation proves something is shifting across the Donetsk axis. Ukrainian forces are adopting highly agile, rapid maneuver strikes that hit hard withdraw, and immediately re-engage to maintain intense pressure before the enemy can stabilize their lines. Within this critical sector, elements of the 47th Mechanized Brigade deployed Bradley armored fighting platforms to execute a series of maneuvers that seemed high risk on paper, but were calculated with precision and absolute synchronization. The tactical lesson goes far beyond how many Russian armor assets burned. The true value lies in how Ukrainian commanders integrated surveillance armor and strike drones to force Russian formations into a defensive posture even, while the adversary held heavy artillery and superior local numbers. Hostile reactions were slow, proving highly expensive in blood. If this doctrine persists, Avdiivka might serve as a textbook demonstration of wearing down the entire Donetsk line through attrition rather than a single massive breakthrough. The strategic query remains stark and ominous. Is this merely a localized skirmish, or does it signal an emerging, highly advanced doctrine of modern warfare? Avdiivka is still a critical pivot, since its geography scales up minor engagements into severe operational stress tests for both warring combatants. Positioned on the doorstep of Donetsk, it has long served as an unyielding bulwark when contact lines collide with concrete and heavy industry. I know every maneuver echoes far beyond just a single trench or redoubt. The Moscow Avdiivka is numere dot on my map. It is a gateway to suppress hostile fire on nearby Donetsk and secure critical supply echelons further down the line. Controlling this sector's strategic choke points enables them to shorten critical supply, lines lock down their flanks, and project force near a highly sensitive regional hub in this campaign. Indeed, my Ukrainian counterparts value this ground quite differently. They avoid static suicidal defense here, instead using the terrain as a force multiplier designed to stall and shatter advancing enemy columns in bloody, attritional battles of local containment. It is efficient. This explains why this sector remains a violent grinder, even without massive maneuver offensives on the board. Never. The terrain dictates this grim reality. It is a network of shattered foundries, dense tree lines and ruins, choking massive armor pushes while rewarding small, lethal fire teams that strike fast and fade away. Here, numerical superiority means very little compared to precision timing and synchronized control of the battle space. That is key. Any tactical delay or command hesitation results in immediate combat losses before units can even adapt. Aggressive momentum is their only option, because stopping inside this meat grinder means instant detection and accurate fire from drone-guided artillery. But pushing forward too aggressively means marching into prepared kill zones where armor and infantry are already targeted. This reality leaves a tight window for decisive action, and missing it inevitably triggers heavy casualties that are impossible to cover up. Ukrainian units adapted to this lethal theater by shifting away from static defenses on dictating the enemy's moves. Rather than trying to block every thrust, they actively maneuver to force opposing commanders into making decisions that bleed armor and momentum. Every hostile probe or push instantly becomes a massive gamble instead of an advance. This strategy does not require holding every forward trench. It demands constant sensor coverage, rapid deployment of highly mobile units, and ruthless timing to strike when the target is secured. Avdiivka offers the broken terrain and tactical density to feed this style of dynamic warfare. That is why this sector stays contested after years of brutal combat. This produces a contact line that rarely falls silent, yet rarely shifts in sudden leaps. Instead, tactical pressure mounts through constant clashes where one side bleeds units just by trying to maneuver. This is why the sector keeps drawing focus from strategic analysts, and why minor skirmishes there carry strategic weight. What happens around this city is not about a single breakthrough. It is about how both sides struggle to control the operational tempo and attrition rate. Tactical errors are punished instantly, and victory is measured in minutes, not in kilometers. Analyzing the Avdiivka approach, we see how timing and battlefield awareness shape an entire engagement before the first direct clash begins. Assault elements did not push forward blindly, nor depend on speed alone. The maneuver relied on deep forward, recon, utilizing drone assets, tracking roads, tree lines, and hostile firing points long before the armor entered the sector. This continuous surveillance allowed tactical commanders to judge when hostile artillery was active, when it paused, and when their telemetry was still degraded. They launched the armor during a tight window when enemy guns were active, but hadn't locked onto precise coordinates. Once the Bradley vehicles commenced their advance movement, was strictly disciplined and calculated, never rushed. The armor utilized covered routes exploiting natural defilades and terrain, breaks to minimize visual exposure. The starved enemy spotters of time needed to confirm targets and relay coordinates to their batteries. Once the Bradleys hit the drop point, the transition to action was completely seamless. Dismounts deployed, instantly fanning out in multiple directions, which neutralized the threat of a single catastrophic strike. They avoided any clustering around the hulls, preventing any tactical pauses easily exploited by hostile fire. Every fire team executed a specific objective with minimal ground to cross-maintaining operational momentum throughout. Russian artillery responded almost instantly when the dismount was spotted. Barrages began landing across the sector. But their strike pattern was scattered, imprecise. Shells cratered, empty dead space, missing the critical deployment zones entirely. My analysis shows Russian gunners were firing only on general movement cues, without verified target coordinates from active forward observers. The volume of fire was terrifying, but its tactical efficacy was minimal. For the assault elements, those initial seconds dictated survival, not raw firepower. With impacts drifting, fire teams kept advancing rather than freezing in place, retreating. They weaponized the blinding smoke and dust as dynamic concealment rapidly closing, the distance to hostile trenches, bunkers. Every meter gained during that tight window neutralized their sluggish targeting, artillery adjustments. For Russian forces, the tactical picture was deteriorating by the second. Once those fast assault teams left the kill zone, adjusting, artillery risked in friendly fire or wasting valuable stockpiles. The window to halt the breach had closed on them completely. In my experience, modern battles are decided before the first major kinetic exchange even begins. The commander who controls the sensors can render a massive enemy barrage into a blunt instrument. The assault force did not require fire superiority here. They only needed a brief tactical window to advance. Open killing fields, forcing combat into confined choke points. Before hostile gunners could even adjust Their optics, the localized tactical picture, had transformed. Dismounts had already dispersed, moving using micro-terrain, preparing for the next assault. This initial approach put Ukrainian units in defensive pockets far tougher to neutralize immediately. What seemed a reckless forward sprint was actually a highly calculated maneuver, driven by battlefield intelligence, not speed. That is why early moves near Avdiivka were critical. They never guarantee absolute victory alone, but they stripped the adversary's primary option for a rapid counterstrike. With that window-shut combat, conformed to Ukrainian terms, establishing conditions for the subsequent phases. The kinetic engagement exposed critical flaws in Russian armor doctrine once pushed into close quarters combat. As Ukrainian teams dug into sentry points, hostile command scrambled reserves toward the active sector to desperately seize back initiative. Momentum. 2 BTRs of the Alpha model charged down a narrow axis, prioritizing speed over tactical caution, a move suggesting a preference for haste over crew. Survivability. This fatal error choked reaction times, stripping maneuver options as the assault elements had no room to pivot once locked into their attack corridor. Defending Bradley crews tracked the threat, early slewing their main guns directly onto the target. In close quarters, the Bradley did not. We had to maneuver aggressively because our target stood completely exposed. We delivered highly precise, direct fire, punching through the lead BTR and halting it almost instantly. Heavy smoke marked the point of impact, shattering their momentum in seconds. The trailing BTR repeated the fatal mistake and met the exact same fate. Before their crew could even deploy dismounts under cover, our fire struck and neutralized them too. Their planned push for quick reinforcements collapsed entirely into a total vehicle loss within seconds. This battle proves how linear movement under our drone surveillance can turn blind speed into fatal vulnerability. Instead, with both target carriers neutralized, the enemy infantry, inside and around them, was forced into the open. Stripped of mobile cover, they scattered across open ground, desperately seeking any tactical terrain features available. This window was critical because dismounted infantry instantly lose all defense against direct fire and shrapnel. Their battle shifted from organized to maneuver to survival, drastically reducing their ability to coordinate any organized counterattack. At the same time, another heavy contact developed along a nearby axis. One of our Bradleys, in a supporting role, identified a hostile target at close range. Confirming the coordinate, our crew launched a Tau anti-tank missile striking the enemy vehicle before it could reposition or bring its guns to bear. That hit neutralized another major threat, cleared the sector, and squeezed Russian maneuvering options entirely. More hostile mechanized assets appeared on our scopes, static or semi-static positions. The Bradley laid down direct cannon fire to hammer these targets, and at least one enemy carrier was confirmed destroyed instantly. Every kill relieved the critical pressure on friendly infantry, compounding the tactical challenge for hostile units trying to hold their lines. In my analysis, the decisive factor was not the ammunition expended, but the strategic timing and execution of the engagement. Hostile armor committed to the fight after friendly forces had already secured battlefield awareness and dominant angles. By the time enemy carriers arrived, the kill zone offered no room for tactical deployment or fire support. The close quarters engagement exposed a larger vulnerability. Battlefield transports designed to insert troops failed miserably when facing precision fire and early visual detection. Without tactical coordination, smoke, or layered support, these assets became mere targets rather than assets. For our frontline commanders, this moment confirmed that the battle had swung in our favor. Heavy threats were eliminated infantry, pressure broken, and the initiative stayed firmly with our units. Gunfire still echoed across the line, but the tactical outcome of the battle was already sealed. Our orderly withdrawal phase showed the starkest contrast in tactical doctrine. Once the primary goals were fully secured, having neutralized the armored threats and relieving our frontline infantry, our units did not try to hold defending ground at all costs. Instead, we shifted focus toward mobility and conserving our forces, treating tactical disengagement as an active phase of battle rather than a sign of defeat. This choice was critical because the Avdiivka terrain ruthlessly punishes any unit exposed longer than necessary. Our Bradleys played a decisive role during this maneuver. Instead of retreating immediately, they maintained disciplined fire toward hostile firing sectors, which denied the enemy any chance to pursue or regroup. This constant pressure established a safe corridor that allowed infantry to withdraw in phases, maintaining tactical control and unit spacing. We executed a structured sequence, it's not a panic, which minimized chaos under extreme pressure. As our forces repositioned, enemy elements tried to disrupt the movement with guided missiles and heavy artillery. I watched one Bradley maneuver violently to break a missile lock, shifting speed and heading to dodge a direct impact. Seconds later, enemy mortars impacted close, but the crew had already displaced to safety. These were not panicked reactions, but doctrine in action, driven by anticipation and superior training. Combat forces us to face different realities. In that same clash, it took hits that stripped its mobility and forced a dead stop. Yet even when tracked the crew stayed shielded inside, and 0 casualties were sustained in that moment. The disabled Bradley was no total loss, because a third vehicle pushed up, rushing in to extract the crew and pull them back under cover. This tactical sequence proves why crew survivability remains paramount when a combat platform gets knocked out of action. A vehicle stripped of mobility is usually counted as a total loss, but saving those trained crews preserves vital combat power beyond the steel itself. In this tactical scenario, retrieving those soldiers kept a local tactical setback from becoming a human tragedy. During the retrograde, Ukrainian units kept this clean disengagement from becoming a chase. Bradley gunners maintained highly disciplined, suppressive fire prioritizing area denial over destruction. The objective was clear by just enough time to secure the movement. Then break contact before Russian elements could coordinate, mount an effective response. The enemy struggled heavily to exploit this. Deprived of heavy armor and under continuous drone surveillance pushing forward was a massive risk. Any advance drew immediate counterfire, stalling any aggressive pursuit and paralyzing their reaction time. This engagement proves modern combat never ends when contact is broken. Executing a retrograde is as complex as the initial assault. Errors during disengagement can bleed a unit faster than the collision. Ukrainian commanders respected this doctrine, applying high-tier hardware and training to control risk rather than chase mere symbolic dirt. A clean disengagement was achieved, preserving both men and machines while maintaining heavy pressure on the enemy. This was no chaotic retreat under fire, as the withdrawal solidified control over the tempo. In warfare measured by minutes and meters, that control matters more than clinging to a single position. The next phase proved their pressure did not end with withdrawal. The Ukrainians treated this as a tactical reset rather than a mere pause. Once the infantry and armor withdrew from direct contact, the commanders began shaping the battle space again, unleashing a mix of armor drones and forward observation. Bradleys quickly returned to supporting roles alongside Abrams tanks, maximizing speed protection and heavy firepower working in unison within a narrow battle space. This tactical pairing allowed their units to threaten multiple axes simultaneously while staying mobile and impossible to pin down. During these maneuvers, FPV drones swarmed overhead along all likely avenues of approach. They did more than strike targets. They maintained reconnaissance over roads open, fields, and choked corridors where reinforcements might try to maneuver. When Russian columns tried to advance, drones directed artillery or struck, directly forcing their drivers to slow down, freeze, or retreat. Each hesitation broke their momentum and ruined any coordinated response, increasing vulnerability to follow-on strikes. This persistent aerial presence changed how hostile forces reacted after the initial contact. Instead of rapid reorganization, their commanders split their focus between holding ground and watching the skies. Movement immediately drew drone eyes, while freezing meant getting mapped and targeted for destruction. This pressure paralyzed tactical decisions, stalling any attempt to rebuild momentum. Our Bradley and Abrams crews exploited this to dominate the battle space without committing to full assault. We pushed forward just enough to threaten key lines, then repositioned before they could adapt. We applied selective fire, not to capture ground, but block corridors and disrupt their tempo. This cumulative attrition meant every skirmish led the Russian forces of time and resources for zero gained. Our FPV drones were critical in keeping this pressure on. Scouting far ahead of armor, they cleared the fog of war for our heavy mechanized assets. When sensors picked up movement, our armor-adjusted combat posture, instantly eliminating surprises and minimizing risk. We did not need massive formations or high exposure, yet we kept the entire front unstable for their forces. The enemy faced a fatal dilemma, a tactical trap. Massing their forces invited instant detection and strikes, while dispersing stripped their ability to launch effective counters. Any attempts to reinforce sectors only triggered our drone swarms. We crippled their advance well before direct kinetic contact. This tactical friction systematically blocked them from seizing the operational initiative without devastating casualties. The core of our doctrine here was restraint. We avoided chasing any high-risk breakthrough or defending static positions stubbornly. Instead, we maximized local combat, leveraged through continuous microstrikes that remained just below the threshold of major maneuvers. This model preserved precious assets while placing the enemy under unrelenting duress. The Avdiivka battle space became less about lines on maps and more about controlling tactical choices. Each enemy deployment invited swift counteraction, while our commanders maintained the flexibility to decide exactly when and where to strike. This operational asymmetry kept us lethal without bleeding out in a massive campaign. Ultimately, we utilized pressure as a tool rather than a single event, pairing mobile armor with strike drones after the withdrawal. Our tactical teams ensured the kinetic engagement never paused. We morphed, controlled the speed, and maintained operational unpredictability, holding control at the tactical level without requiring massive reinforcements. This defense of Avdiivka was never a single decisive shift on our theater map, nor did the lines reshape over one night. It proved how we are disrupting the tempo of warfare across the Donetsk axis, demonstrating how to apply constant pressure without paying a high casualty price for rigid and indefensible ground. In modern war, we do not wait. The Ukrainian units strike fast, withdrawing, in order then rapidly re-engaging, before Russian lines can consolidate. This tactical doctrine effectively weaponizes time, rendering the Russian counter-response sluggish, far costlier, and incapable of solving immediate threats. For Moscow, the strategic dilemma shifts beyond replacing attrited armor or deploying raw infantry forward. They face a fast-evolving style of warfare, where decision cycle speed beats raw firepower, and where any delay invites immediate drone and armor, precision strikes. Massed artillery and manpower still play a role, but they fail to compensate for sluggish coordination and predictable maneuvers. If this combat pattern persists, battles across the Donetsk theater will pivot less on grand offensives and more on repeated moments where one side dictates tempo and initiative. This instability makes the Avdiivka pocket critical to study. Is this merely a localized engagement or the clear emergence of a new operational phase? Along the Donetsk front, join our tactical debrief below, and for deep intelligence on actual battles, advanced weaponry, and the grand strategy